This is the second municipal workshop, as I just mentioned. We provided a summary of the overall grantee guidebook, and we requested written and verbal feedback from all of you. We sent that out on the 25th of May if you need it. And the deadline for providing feedback was June 3rd. All the feedback that was received is being presented to you today, and at the conclusion, we will be doing final edits to the guidebook, and then we hope to have it posted later this week. You'll also receive it by email. This is a living document, and we're going to be reviewing it and revising it periodically with your input. Next slide, please. So this is what many of you shared with us, that you're still having a difficulty understanding exactly how the funding for these Surtax grants work. There's some confusion regarding why there needs to be an invoice accompanying the first advance payment. Some of you expressed that it's been challenging to get your CFO or finance director to sign off on that invoice, and have asked that the county find an alternative to that. The project funding agreement outlines reporting requirements that are not necessarily a reality for some of you that executed your project funding agreements, but have not received your first funding advance. And of course, some of you felt that the guidebook didn't fully describe the process that's being used by the MPO with respect to the initial cycle 1 projects retaining their ranking. Next slide, please. So just to provide some clarity, all project funding agreements for Surtax grants are actually advance contracts, meaning that the funding is provided in advance of the work and not on a reimbursable basis. So your individual project funding agreements, or PFAs, describe the remittance schedule for the funding and the maximum amount of advance funds allowable in each particular schedule. To get the first advance, it was proposed in the guidebook that a municipality would submit an invoice signed by the finance director or CFO. Again, we're talking about the first advance for the project. Based on the feedback that we received over the last few weeks, this approach has been modified so that the first advance request, an invoice could actually be submitted by the municipality's project manager or the Surtax point of contact, and future invoices will still require a sign off by your CFO or a designee. So we've agreed to this approach, and we've made those modifications to the guidebook. Next slide, please. So how it's going to work is to get your first advance, you'll be provided either by Alex Mayorga or Lena Silva an advance request invoice template. It's going to give you all the information you need, including the amount of the first advance. All you have to do is take that information, place it on your letterhead, sign it, and return it to us. And then your contract administrator will verify with you if your municipality is already listed in the county's financial system as a vendor. And if not, we will reach out to you to help you with registration and confirm your preference to receive either a wire or a hard check. Next slide, please. This is the template. This is what it looks like. And as you can see, for the first advance, it can be signed by the project manager or the Surtax point of contact. For future advances, there will be invoices that will accompany this template. And so it will need to be signed off on by a CFO or finance director, except in circumstances that we will cover in a little bit. Next slide, please. The other comments that we received were related to reporting requirements. So several of you voiced some concerns about complying with the project funding agreement timeframes, especially the quarterly financial and quarterly performance reports outlined in Exhibit C to the project funding agreement. So the questions ranged from, does reporting run from the date of the PFA execution, or does it run from the date that we receive our first advance? Or is it tied to the plan of record that's being produced for the construction phase projects? If no activity has occurred, do we still submit the reports and just put NA? Municipalities also asked for reporting to more directly tie to the project type and the phase that's being funded. Those were all very good observations and suggestions, and the county agrees. And we've come up with 2 approaches based on your feedback. Next slide, please. So for reporting purposes, unless otherwise stated by the contract administrator, your reporting periods will be determined either by your notice to proceed. And again, this ties back to the plan of record question. And this is going to relate primarily to construction phase projects. For non-construction phase projects, we're proposing that the first advance is the date that is tied to your first reporting requirement. There are a few situations in cycle 1 and even in cycle 2 where the Surtax funding is just a component of a larger project that a municipality is already constructing or designing. And so in those particular situations, the reporting time frames may be tied to the actual agreement execution date. And so to ensure complete clarity about the reporting obligations that you have, each municipal project manager is going to be invited to a grantee meeting with the county's contract manager. And also, if your project is a construction project or certain design projects, you will also be having that meeting with the PMO, the Program Management Office. You're going to receive calendar reminders of when and what type of reports are actually due, just to try to help. Next slide, please. So we received a lot of other comments as well, and just wanted to give you some highlights of those. Some of these were verbal and some of these were in writing. Many of them have already been incorporated into the next draft of the grantee guidebook. So with requested specifics about how to register for updates and newsletters about Map Broward, requested a little bit more clarity around the process that should be used for updating a municipality's Surtax point of contact. The suggestion was made that we go ahead and hyperlink to the global interlocal agreement as amended. So the second amendment is now hyperlinked on page 17. The graph related to the municipal Surtax grant cycles should more clearly reflect what's actually happening with the cycle 1 municipal capital projects retaining their rank. And then we did receive a request that project managers be permitted to sign off on invoices and the quarterly financial reports instead of the municipality CFO or finance director. And we will only find this acceptable if a city manager formally designates the project manager instead of the financial director or CFO. So we will have to receive that from your city manager on letterhead. Next slide, please. This is just a table that gives you an idea of the suggestions that we received, the section that they related to, and whether or not we accepted them and placed them into the next version of the guidebook. Next slide, please. If you want to find the guidebook, like I said, we will email it to you, but if you would prefer to use our website to look for it or to even watch the videos, the workshops that we've done about the guidebook, you can find it under the Municipal Partners tab, Surtax Grantee Resources. There's a lot of information there, and we would welcome your feedback on things that you wish were there that aren't there, because we really are trying to make sure that it has the capacity to meet your needs, that it's robust and comprehensive. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this time, any questions received in the chat box will be read into the record and answered as best we can. We're going to go ahead and unmute the participants. We'll take any additional questions. Please raise your virtual hand to indicate you would like to speak. Please keep yourself muted unless you are speaking. And if we are unable to answer the question that you are asking either verbally or in the chat, we'll go ahead and make sure that we respond to you in writing. And we'll also, in some instances, place the question into our frequently asked questions area, because often your question is a question that many other municipalities are asking us. So again, this entire workshop is being recorded, and we hope to have that up on our website in a few business days. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Lena to read any questions that we've received in the chat.
We have one request to clarify the invoices section. And they indicated for signature on invoices, are these invoices for payment to vendors or invoices to the county?
Okay, that's a great question. Because this is an advance contract, when you send the invoice is intended to be truing up the previous advance that you received. So you're invoicing the county to prove that you've spent the money that has been advanced, and the attachments to that invoice, there's an attestation. It's really an attestation that's coming from your finance director or CFO. And that attestation is the cover that the invoices that are going to your primes, your subs, your contractors, those will be attached to that attestation, and it will all be submitted to the county so that the advance can be trued up, and then you can be eligible to receive your next advance. Does that answer the question? Okay, great.
Those are all of the questions in the chat at this moment.
Are there any participants on the line that have questions that they'd like to? Okay.
I have a question, Gretchen.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tammy.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand.
It's fine.
The concern from our CFO on the advances was if obviously we put into an account that would be accruing interest until we actually incur those costs, and she was concerned about that and how we would handle the interest that was accruing.
So you'd be placing it into a segregated account as required, and it would be an interest-bearing account, and you wanted to know how the interest would be handled. Let me get with my finance folks and find out if there's anything specific because I don't recall that being addressed in the agreement. I need to look back at the agreement and make sure that there isn't specific language that addresses exactly how that should be handled.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Lena, did we get something else in the chat?
Yes, we have, does the project funding agreement take priority over the guidance document? For example, the PFA states material changes needs written approval from contract admin. Guidance implies any changes requires admin approval.
Well, in all instances, the funding agreement will take precedence over the guidance document. If there's any inconsistency between the PFA and the guidance document, we need to address that. We wouldn't want that to be the case. But yes, your legal agreement is the binding determinant. Any other questions?
I have one question. This is Gio Batista, Gretchen.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. In going over the sample interlocal agreement between Broward County and municipalities,
Mhm.
I was reading it and trying to figure out if the utilization reports or the reporting are going to be attached to that as an exhibit, or if the utilization reports are a separate document that'll be submitted separately outside of the agreement itself.
So the project funding agreements do have exhibits to give you an idea of what you will have to submit at a later date. And I believe the utilization report is one of the exhibits to your project funding agreement.
Okay.
They're almost samples so that you understand what's going to be expected of you. I think Althea Lewis is on the line. Althea, did you want to expound on that? If you're able. So Gio, I guess she's
No,
not able.
Gretchen, can you repeat the question for me, please?
Sure, Gio, did you want to repeat your question?
Yeah, I was looking through the exhibits and I didn't find a specific reference to a report that's called utilization report. It might be in there. I may have missed something, but I was just trying to find out if all the reporting requirements under the agreement are incorporated into the agreement, or is there a possibility that we might have other reporting requirements that are outside of the agreement that might be required by the contract administrator?
Well, the utilization is not part of the PMO, Gretchen.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are other, Geo, go ahead.
The utilization I think that you're referring to, Gio, is actually if you have a CBE goal attached to your project funding agreement, and that's handled with our Office of Economic and Small Business Development. They actually work with you to get the monthly utilization on CBEs. And
Right.
I apologize, I thought you were referring to a performance-related utilization report.
No, actually the CBE portion of it. I appreciate it.
So do we have any other questions?
Gretchen, this is Leah with Miramar.
Hi, Leah.
Quick question on the project funding agreement. So the quarterly funding amounts, the table that's in the PFA, how exactly does that funding work? Do we get the, let's say the first row, okay, so the first quarterly funding amount, do we get that first and then we give you the deliverables that are associated with that on the table? Or we give the deliverables first and then we get the pot of money?
The former. So this is an advance agreement. So we advance you the amount that's in the schedule. And just to be clear, because not everyone has a quarterly funding schedule, everyone's project funding agreements funding schedule is specific to the project. So if you have a quarterly funding schedule and deliverables that are associated with each advance payment, then we advance the money, then you provide the deliverables and the invoices associated before you qualify to receive your next advance.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, well, not seeing or hearing any additional questions, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. We really appreciate your partnership and your time, your insight, your suggestions. They're very helpful. So again, this guidebook is going to be a living document. We really want to make sure that it is helpful and provides you with the information that you need to be successful with these projects. We'd also encourage you to use the dashboard to communicate about your projects and educate with your internal team, your elected officials, your residents, and your businesses about the projects that are going to be happening in your municipality and around the county. So if you'd like to take a moment and go ahead and scan the QR code and play around in the project dashboard, we certainly appreciate you doing so and giving us any feedback that you think might make it a better tool. Next slide, please. So in addition to the public project dashboard, there are other great ways to communicate about your Surtax funded projects. If you're interested, there is a special event tomorrow at our Traffic Management Center on Commercial Boulevard. And while it's very much focused on municipal marketing and PIOs, we're happy to have Surtax points of contact or project managers attend. If you're interested, there's going to be a lunch panel that's focused on the diversity of our community and ways to communicate more inclusively with residents and businesses about your projects and the media. There's going to be a representative from Nextdoor that's going to describe ways to maximize impact utilizing the Nextdoor tool, and every municipality will receive its own unique branding kit on a USB for your specific Surtax funded projects in cycle 1 and cycle 2. And if you'd like to get a little bit more information about that event, please call our PIO at 954-357-9505. Next slide, please. So again, we would just ask that you really take the time to review the guidebook, really familiarize yourself with the elements of the project funding agreements. If you haven't gotten a project funding agreement, please make sure that you've submitted all the required documentation for the type of project that you have been awarded. There are different requirements depending on whether your project is a planning, design, or construction phase. We've gotten a lot of questions about what is an R&M project. The rehabilitation and maintenance awards are all construction phase projects, and most of them were construction ready and able to be constructed within 12 months. So we would really encourage you to get the information on your rehabilitation and maintenance projects submitted so we can get those going. You're also, as I mentioned, going to be invited to go through your contract terms, and we would hope that you would take that opportunity just to make sure that your reporting requirements and financial documentation is something that you're comfortable with and you understand the expectations. Next slide, please. And that's it. Are there any other questions, comments, suggestions? Anything before we leave for the good of the order? Okay, I see one in the chat. So how do municipalities get paid or reimbursed for branding requirements? Great question. As detailed in the guidebook, the county is going to provide you with all of the required branding for your projects. That's one of the reasons why we're having the event tomorrow. We will do the ordering of signage. We will make sure that you have it at a time that works for your specific project. If you are doing a planning project, the branding is very simple. We're just asking that you place a cooperative logo on the design documents, on the final plan that is produced. If you're doing a construction project, there are lots of different options that are available to you, and they're detailed in the guidebook. So you have the autonomy to decide what works in your particular municipality. We're trying to be very context sensitive, and if there are specific questions about the branding and marketing, I would invite you to come to the event tomorrow or to reach out to our public information officer and walk through those questions with her. But no, nobody is going to be expected to pay for the branding and marketing requirements. We're going to take care of that on our end. Anything else? Did something else come in the chat, Lena? I thought I just saw something. Oh, from Bernadette. We are going to try to get this webinar, the recording of this webinar, up on our website later this week. If you're having trouble finding it, just reach out to us and we'll make sure you get a copy, we'll get a link to you. All right, well, with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off and wish you all a very nice rest of your week. And thank you for your time again.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.